Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 2 of the official Rivals of Ixalan previews. We have a lot of cards to talk about that were previewed over the course of the day, and actually we have some really good ones, a few that I'm extremely excited about. You do see a new Planeswalker on the title card, more on her a little bit later. I want to get things started pretty quickly here, but just a really fast reminder, if you like what we do and you're looking for a way to support our channel, just check out the description below. You'll find a link to Patreon there, and you'll also find product links through Amazon as well as Flipside Gaming. Rivals is available in both places, among many other things. Always appreciate that. But with that being said, let's get into it. We got a lot to talk about. This is Adolfo Soto. This was actually a card we talked about in a video we did yesterday because it was leaked. So I won't go through it all again today, but this has now officially been released by Wizards, so it has been confirmed, so that leak does look pretty legit. Bishop of Binding. Okay, this one's interesting. It's a white and 3 Vampire Cleric. It's a rare 1/1. When this enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. When this attacks, target vampire gets +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. And this could be itself. In fact, it's probably going to be itself that you want to target most of the time, unless you really want to attack in with a 1/1, which is not going to happen all too often, right? So it could happen if your opponent has no defense, right? But I think for the most part, you're going to want to give that ability to this when it attacks. So is this a good card at the end of the day? Well, here's the thing. It's interesting. I mean, it is a removal spell. I do like that, but it's a very fragile removal spell. It's probably not going to live very long. Your opponent's going to get what they lost back relatively quickly. Maybe you get one good attack out of it, depending on the board state and the situation. But I'd be hard-pressed to play this in like standard over some of the just legit removal spells, either the enchantment exile spells or just plain old destroy spell. So I don't really see myself running this over any of those. I mean, I guess if I want to continue to put pressure on the opponent, maybe in an aggressive vampire build or just any sort of aggressive build, I might be interested in this card. I don't want to count it out completely yet until we see the full set. But I don't know. It's really hard for me to say that I would play this over just a regular old removal spell. For limited, if I need a removal spell, this will do in a pinch. And I think it could be fun in limited, especially like get rid of your opponent's like really big dinosaur and then attack in with this and do some damage. It could be kind of crazy. So I could see myself running it in sealed or draft. Maybe not a real high pick for me, but especially if I'm starting to worry about how much removal I have, it will be very playable, probably more often than not. Glorious Destiny. And this one is a Chinese simplified preview card. A white and 2 enchantment with Ascent. When this enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1. They have vigilance as long as you have the city's blessing. Okay, first off, it is a Anthem effect that's based on the tribe you choose. Maybe not like the old days where we'd get Anthem effects that were 2 or 3 mana and they just covered everything. But that's okay because I don't think they print a card like that anymore. But because we are in the world of tribal Ixalan, there's actually a pretty nice impact from a card like this. So where does this fit in? First off, it is only 1 white, so it is splashable. Keep that in mind. The decks that would like this, though, I think are the ones that are more focused on going wide. The first thing that pops into my mind is Vampires. Mono White Vampires is a very interesting deck because it actually had a pretty good showing at the Pro Tour last time, and not a lot of people played it, but the team that did play it, they all got to day 2 of the Pro Tour. And the deck actually looked pretty sweet. Sweet enough for a lot of players to want to pick it up and play it. It actually put up some decent results in smaller tournaments after that, and players still play that at Friday Night Magic. So there are some tools we're going to see today that actually enhance that deck, and I think this could be one of them. Now, this is a particular deck that because you're going wide and you're throwing your lands down, I do think that it is possible to hit the city's blessing at some point during the game, and then things get even better for you. But even without the vigilance, I still think this is a pretty good Anthem effect for a go wide deck, especially when it's on color. Now, if you want to get a little more creative, maybe you think about throwing this into like a Merfolk deck. That's another deck that has some go wide tendencies. Maybe not to the same level as the Vampires, and you would have to splash for that, which could be a tad awkward. So I don't know if it quite gets there. As far as like Pirates go, again, there's going to be some color challenges there. And Dinosaurs, I don't know if they quite need this. Like, it's a nice to have, but is it a need to have? Probably not. So I feel like this is more of a Vampire card and potentially could see some standard play in a modified version of Mono White Vampires. And the reason I say that is because there's more cards to come that really make that deck feel like it could be more viable next time around. This is also just a fun deck to throw in any sort of tribal commander build as well. Paladin of Atonement. Okay, here's one of those vampire cards. It is a white and 1 Vampire Knight, rare, 1/1. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this, and when this dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. So here's the thing for me. First off, it's a 1/1 for 2. I don't like that. But the vampire deck could use a 2-drop. And you know what? If it's a 1/1 vampire, that's a 2-drop, and maybe you have an Anthem effect like we saw a moment ago, or maybe there's a Lord that we're going to talk about in a little bit that makes this a little more appealing. If this can come in as a 2/2 or shortly after become a 2/2, then maybe you start to feel like you're getting your money's worth here. Now, that's not always going to happen, so is the card good enough on its own in a vacuum? It's okay. Like, it's not amazing, but again, that 2 spot could be imperative for that deck to really be able to gain ground. And because of that, maybe this does see standard play, if nothing else. It is a card that if it survives, there's definitely some benefit to it, but it has to survive and has to get through those early turns before it starts to grow. It doesn't have evasion either, so, I mean, take that into account. But again, I do think it could fit into a build, perhaps. Also, too, remember, there are some ways to finesse this. Like, for example, what if you use Pain Lands? So if I cast something on my turn with a Pain Land, the next turn, beginning of the next upkeep, because it does work each upkeep, this will get a +1/+1 counter. If I have an extra Pain Land untapped, I wait till my opponent's turn's about to end, go ahead and tap it, damage myself again, get another +1/+1 counter. So you can play around with this a little bit. There's ways to interact with it. Now for limited, I think this is a fine pickup for you because, you know what, 2-drops are important. Again, it feels a little fragile, but it does have some good upside to it, especially if you are all in on vampires in your draft, for example. Next card comes to us from a Korean language preview. It's Shrine Altisaur. It's a white and 4 dinosaur 3/4. If a source would deal damage to another dinosaur you control, prevent all but one of that damage. And you can see the dinosaur is inside with its head poking out. It's awesome art. So anyway, what's the deal with this card? Because when you think like 5 casting cost dinosaur, you're probably thinking something a little larger than a 3/4. Like dinosaurs are very big, they beat down. This one's more defensive, and that's maybe not a bad thing. Now, do I see this card sliding into the Gruul dinosaur deck that existed before? Probably not, right? Well, it's not on color, first off. But secondly, it also isn't what that particular deck I think was trying to do. Now, it does open up a conversation, though. Do you completely scrap what you saw from the Gruul deck and start thinking about a different dinosaur deck that's maybe more dependent on Enrage? And perhaps that's different colors. Could be Naya, could be even Boros. But whatever you do with it, it does allow the Enrage to still go through, but it protects your stuff really nicely. Now, it is worthy to note it doesn't affect itself. So you can still kind of take this out, but it does have 4 toughness. It stands up to effects to do 3 to it, things like Sweltering Suns and such. So I actually think that's kind of sweet and was a good idea when it came to design of this card. Now, if we do see this show up, I think it's an all-new version of the dinosaur deck that's really focused on Enrage and keeping the dinosaur safe from things like damage spells and in combat situations. But this card could do the trick. We'll have to wait and see on this one. But if that type of deck can get there, you never know. Definitely an awesome card to throw in a Commander Dinosaur build, though. This is something I think could be a lot of fun, especially considering that you're going to be dealing with stronger damage effects in Commander. Sky Marcher Aspirant. This one costs a white. It's a Vampire Soldier. Uncommon. It's a 2/1 with Ascend. And if you get the City's Blessing, this will have flying. So let's talk about limited first with this one because it is a very good limited card. It's basically a Savannah Lion with the vampire archetype, which definitely matters in the world of Ixalan. And it also has this ability that later in the game, maybe it can make it fly. So a lot of upside here for just 1 mana. Early on, it's a nice little beater. It can trade up. A lot of times it will definitely trade up to like at least 2/2s if nothing else. So I just like generally the feel of this card. Also, too, you got to remember there's some great synergies with vampires. We just saw an Anthem effect a few moments ago if you're into Tribal Vampire. There's another Anthem effect for vampires coming up a little later in the video. So there's a lot of potential for this to even get bigger and just kind of work through the curve of the game, which is kind of cool. So what about Standard? Well, I'm going to say this. I don't think it's good enough for Standard just on the surface, but I'm not going to count it out completely either just because there's some great synergies for vampires. Like I mentioned, there's one coming up that really could make me think about that. Maybe this does show up in a aggressive style vampire deck. Or maybe it's just an aggressive white-red deck, something like that. I feel like the pieces are coming together. This could be a part of it, but that is a little bit of a long shot, and maybe that's something that doesn't happen in this meta, maybe a future meta, but I don't know. It feels a little fragile on its own. It definitely needs to have a support system for it to make it to standard. I just don't want to count it out quite yet. Starving Paladin. This comes to us from a French language spoiler, and it's a white and 1 Vampire Knight, so another 2 casting cost vampire, 3/3. This doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever you gain life, untap Starving Paladin. So here's a 2-drop that I actually feel pretty comfortable with in the vampire deck among maybe other places. And here's why I say that. First off, I mentioned earlier, it would have been nice to have another 2-drop for the original mono white vampire deck. This is a fine one. Even if you're a little apprehensive about attacking with this early, it's still a really nice blocker to deal with small creatures as a 3/3 for 2. It slows down the game a little bit, lets you get your engine going. Secondly, if I want to be more aggressive, there's ways to do that too, and that could simply be the fact that there's a lot of life gain opportunities in the mono white vampire deck, or maybe you just go a whole new route with this and go some sort of white or white in another color aggro deck, and you play things like Glory Bound Initiate. I think that could actually be kind of sweet. So could a build like that get there? Potentially. That's something that we could see down the road maybe. So this card would definitely be a part of a deck that follows that formula, no doubt. And I do think it's good enough to make it maybe into a mono white vampire deck or some sort of variant of that. I do think mono white vampire is going to evolve a little bit with this set and turn into at least splashing black. And you're going to see why I say that in a little while. When it comes to limited for this card, I think it's still a fine card. I mean, 2-drops are always important in your drafts and your sealed games. So a 2 casting cost 3/3, even if attacking with it could be a little cumbersome, it's still a nice blocker. If you're not running it in your main for some reason, it's great to bring in against aggro. Admiral's Order. This one's 2 blue and 1. It's an instant with raid. If you attacked with a creature this turn, you may pay 1 blue rather than pay this spell's mana cost, and it counters target spell. Interesting. This card was previewed by LSV on Channel Fireball. Typically, they try to give Channel Fireball some of the spikier cards. I mean, this definitely feels spiky. It is a timing card, though. And here's what I like about the card. Here's what I don't like about the card. I mean, if I'm in the more classic kind of draw-go control game, this isn't super exciting. It's basically a cancel, right? But if I'm more aggressive, again, maybe that pirate deck happens or something like that. Maybe the Merfolk deck, although I don't know if the Merfolk deck is really on this plan, more so than maybe the pirate deck would be. If the pirate deck can get there, though, where you have other raid triggers and such, this is going to make your opponent think a lot. Even the threat of you maybe having this card is going to make your opponent think a lot. So think about it this way. Main phase, don't play anything. Combat, okay, I'm going to attack in with something. Now, if my opponent has some sort of combat trick or something, they have to think twice. You might have that 1 blue mana counterspell. And if they do try to pull a combat trick or something and you counter it, you still have enough mana perhaps to play something on your second main. Now you move to your second main. If they didn't do anything during combat, you still have a 1 blue mana counterspell up. So you could play something maybe for like 4 mana and still have 1 blue up to counter any sort of like counter magic or removal they may try to pull on you for the rest of that turn. That's actually kind of sweet. And later in the game, it's also a cancel if you need it to be. So I think the card is actually really good just because of the thought your opponent is going to have to go into when it comes to playing around it. And again, it might not even be in your hand and it could be a powerful asset. Just having one of these in your deck make your opponent think about it. So I do think this could see some standard play. It's got to be the right deck though, so maybe it's not right away. If the pirate deck can get there, that's really where I want to play this thing. But again, even in like limited games, like I would play this because I would play it as a cancel sometimes, and sometimes you get more value out of it. And again, once your opponent knows you have it, they're going to really have to slow down their game or they could be in trouble. Induced Amnesia. Okay, this is a blue and 2. It is a rare enchantment, and when this enters the battlefield, target player exiles cards from his or her hands face down, then draws that many cards. When this is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hand. So kind of interesting. It's sort of like a windfall effect where you're targeting the player, so you could just use it on yourself. You could use it on someone else if you have some sort of trick, like a Sphinx's tutelage or something like that. I don't know. So there are reasons to do both. And it's an enchantment, which is intriguing because other spells like Windfall, obviously they go to the graveyard, but this sits there, so you could flicker this, maybe use it multiple times if you have some tricks to go along with it, maybe bounce it, play it again. So all of those reasons make me think about this card. And I'm sure there's ways to break it, but the big question is, are there ways to break it that are more efficient than ways to break other cards that already exist similar to it? I don't know. There probably are, considering it is a permanent. So yeah, the flicker effects, bounce effects, you could get a lot of mileage out of this. And I do think that's kind of cool, maybe for more casual or commander builds. Now, what about standard? I would want to try this in the approach deck. As a matter of fact, MTG Goldfish, this was Saffron Olive's preview card. And in the article, I would recommend checking it out because he always does awesome brews. He does a couple brews with this card, one of which is approach. Like, throwing this in an approach deck just feels like it could be good, because the deal is you want to work towards getting back your approach, and this kind of helps you get there faster if you time it right. So I think that's actually kind of sweet. And he even looked at a modern deck running like a lot of small creatures like Prowess, some young pyromancers, that type of thing. Looked kind of interesting there too. So I don't know if that would quite get there in modern, but I always love the brews he puts together, so it seemed pretty sweet. So yeah, I do think this might see some play in the approach deck going forward and could make the approach deck even better. So it's something to watch. And when it comes to limited, like, I do think this is playable just to get more of a look through your deck. And that alone just makes it fine for you there. I'd be happy to run this. Kumina's Awakening. 2 blue and 2. It's an enchantment rare with Ascend. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. If you have the City's Blessing instead, only you draw a card. So here we are at another way to create more card draw. This one a little more expensive. It's an enchantment again, so it's going to cost you a little bit to kind of buy into this. Here's the pros, though. If you can get past the 2 blue and 2 casting costs, then on your next upkeep, you're going to be drawing an extra card. Now, everyone's going to be drawing an extra card, but what I like about this is they're not doing it on their upkeep, they're doing it on your upkeep. So unless they draw an instant, they're not going to be able to use the card before you use your extra card, basically. So it gives you that timing advantage, which I really do like. Now, later on, if you can hit the City's Blessing, then wonderful. Now you're only drawing the card, no one else is, so you're getting the advantage to it. Now, if you're trying to get tricky with this and create card draw for your opponents, maybe you're playing Commander or something and you're playing like Pillow Fort or maybe Nakusa or something like that, then this gets a little awkward because you have to stay below your thresholds. But I don't know, maybe it still works for you. Now, standard, something like Approach again, maybe, but I do think this is starting to get a little too expensive now because it costs 4, you're taking the turn off to play it. Now, it does move you through your deck a little bit faster. Also is going to move everyone else through their deck a little bit faster, especially in the early to mid game. And I don't know, I feel a little uncomfortable about taking a risk like that. I mean, making my opponent draw cards and I don't have any sort of other like ulterior motive for doing it always makes me a tad bit nervous. I know it's reciprocal, I'm still drawing cards too, but in certain matchups, you don't want your opponent to get through the deck faster than you're getting through your deck. Like, this could be interesting. What about a mirror approach, right? Like, you wouldn't be gaining a whole lot from that. So, I don't know if it quite gets there in standard. It's an interesting card, though. I do see people playing with it casually. I think it's great in limited because, again, it is a reciprocal effect. But if you can maybe have a lot of treasure tokens or something like that to back it up to try to feel like you have a really good chance of playing this with the City's Blessing, then the card becomes amazing. Like, definitely, if you feel like you can throw out a bunch of treasure or something like that and support the Ascend mechanic, yeah, play this because it's going to be incredible for you. So it just kind of depends. Now, will there be a pirate deck that's maybe doing that in standard? I don't know. I haven't seen enough pieces to make me comfortable with that idea yet, but we still have a lot more of the set to see. Seafloor Oracle, 2 blue and 2, Merfolk Wizard, rare 2/3. When a Merfolk you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Okay, so we're going to be looking at a lot of Merfolk today that are pretty good. This is one of them. This one I say is pretty good because the casting cost maybe is a tad high, 2 blue and 2, 2/3, but that ability is phenomenal. Now, where you want this to fall in, though, is you want to play this after you already have like some tokens or maybe some unblockable tricks with Merfolk, and there's a fair amount of those out there. So if you can connect with some damage, like this card replaces itself relatively quickly, maybe even the turn you put it into play, and then everything beyond that's gravy. It's just card draw. So 2, 3 for 4, like on paper, okay, that doesn't feel amazing. It's not super durable, but it doesn't necessarily have to be either. Just play it when your opponent's shields are down and attack in, maybe draw like 2, 3 cards. You're having a pretty good day with this thing. So I do think we're going to see a Merfolk deck in standard, not just because of this card. We're going to be looking at more in a little bit here, but I think it's going to get there. I'm very excited about it, actually. And this could be a part of it, no doubt. Also, Modern Merfolk, maybe. I don't know. I do think the casting cost may be a little expensive, and there are some other really tight cards in that deck right now. So maybe it doesn't quite get there. But I think for Standard, you will see it, definitely see play. And for Draft, of course, if you're all in on Merfolk, this is going to be a huge pickup for you. All right, our next card comes to us from a Japanese language spoiler. Timestream Navigator. Costs a blue and 1. It's a human pirate wizard. It has Ascend. 2 blue and 2. Tap. Put Timestream Navigator on the bottom of its owner's library. Take an extra turn after this one. Activate this ability only if you have the City's Blessing. It's a 1/1. This is an interesting mythic. Here's what catches my eye first on this. It's a Time Walk effect that does not exile itself. It's been a long time, right? Because that's been the standard way you design take an extra turn. It's like, take an extra turn, exile the card. It's almost like they're just linked together forever now. But for the first time in a very long time, we don't have that. We have a card that goes back into your library. Now it goes to the bottom, but there's ways to get around that, right? So here's the drawback, though. You need to have the City's Blessing for it to work, and that's a little awkward. You have to work to get there. If you can get there, though, this card does become kind of crazy. Maybe it's more of a commander thing than anything else. You get it with a lot of tutors, like you just have a ton of tutors, and you just keep taking turns, that type of thing. But you do have to get it out, and you do have to untap with it with the City's Blessing. That's a tad awkward. Once you get it to happen maybe once, and you can get the City's Blessing and get tutors to get it back, and you keep taking extra turns, well, I could see maybe a situation where you could go endless with it, but it's going to take some finagling. And are there other ways to go endless that are simpler? I don't know, probably. But in conjunction with tutors, like casually or in like Commander, I think you can do some fun things with this. I think what holds this back from, say, I don't know, extra turns in Modern or in Standard, for example, just in any deck, I think is just the fact that it's so dependent, again, on the 10 permanents to happen, and it's really fragile, and you have to untap with it. So I don't really see someone trying to get cute with this one. I think it's a little too hard to make work in Standard right now, especially as a 1/1. I don't know. Just feels really hard to make happen. So it's a fun, casual card, though, no doubt. And don't take your eyes off it. Someone could break this card, don't get me wrong. But I do think it is going to take a little bit of work. All right, Watery Ambush, a blue and 3. This one comes to us from a German language preview. It's an enchantment. When this enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 Merfolk tokens with hexproof. Pay a blue and 3. Target Merfolk can't be blocked this turn. So, okay, it's another one of these enchantments. It costs 4, but what I like about this one is it does give you something other than just waiting until next turn or really not doing anything unless you have 8 mana the turn you play it. You do get 2 1/1 Merfolk tokens with hexproof. So you're getting something out of it. And I do think Merfolk decks going a little bit wide is going to be good for them in the upcoming meta. So maybe a card like this actually does see a little bit of Standard play. Not a 4 of, but maybe it's a 2 of or something in a Merfolk deck. I like the fact that it gives you a couple tokens that are hexproof, and it also allows for potential situations where creatures can't be blocked, which could be important, like with the card we saw a few moments ago. So it's a decent mana sink, perhaps, for that deck. So this is one to watch. Now, this card alone and the last card wouldn't make me say Merfolk's going to get there in Standard, but stay tuned. I promise there's a payoff if you keep watching. As for Limited, again, getting a couple tokens I think is actually good. Drafter Sealed, I'd be happy to pick this card up and play it. It's a nice uncommon. Dead Man's Chest. This is a black and 1 enchantment, or it's a rare. Enchant creature an opponent controls. When enchanted creature dies, exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast non-land cards from among them for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells. Yikes. Okay, there's a lot of words on that card, but you know what it's saying to me when I read it out loud? It's saying, why aren't you just playing another draw spell in your deck? Because that's basically what this is, but you're trying to draw from your opponent's deck, and you might not even hit anything, and you might not even be able to pull it off. So that's the problem. Granted, if you cast this for 2 mana and you get super lucky, you could get a pretty big payout. But I don't want to worry about getting super lucky. I'd rather just play a spell that's just going to draw me a couple cards, and I'm happy with that, quite honestly, even if I have to pay a little more for it. It's just too high variance is the bottom line. This definitely will not see any Standard play. The variance is much too high. And when it comes to Limited, would I play it in Drafter Sealed? Maybe Sealed more so if I have room in my deck and my pool's not great. just because, again, if I don't have any card draw spells, maybe I fall back on this as a quasi card draw spell, but it's not something I want to do. Like I said, it just is too much to put together. My opponent has to have a creature. I have to put it on the creature. That creature has to die. Then I have to look at the top cards of their library, and maybe there's something I want to cast there. Maybe I hit a bunch of lands. Maybe I hit like their 2/2, right? And turn 8 of the game, right? So it just doesn't feel good to me. Ravenous Chupacabra. Okay. This is actually really sweet. 2 black and 2. Beast Horror. Uncommon 2/2. When this enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Wow. This is nice. Now, you could argue, sure, there's removal, it's instant speed. There's removal that is more versatile, lets you take out a planeswalker if you need to, right? We already have those tools. But this one is a 2/2 body also. Lets you put pressure on the opponent, and it could really swing a board state, taking out their best creature, giving you 2/2 on top of what you already have. This thing's not messing around. I mean, this is a very simple, efficient card. We haven't seen anything like this in a really long time. Maybe we've never really seen anything quite like this, because even things like Necrotal had drawbacks, certain things they couldn't target, right? This is pretty awesome. This sees standard play, maybe sees modern play. I don't know. It's a little expensive, maybe. I know modern's so quick nowadays, but maybe. Definitely standard play, though. And this thing is going to be in a lot of places, I think, in standard. This isn't a card that shows up in one deck. I think decks that are comfortable with a double black are going to be really happy to run this, not just in the upcoming meta, but future metas. This card's not messing around. It is awesome. Limited draft, this is first pickable, probably in most packs it shows up in, quite honestly. This is an awesome, awesome card for your draft and for your seal. And at uncommon, a few of those will be going around the table, although they'll get picked up real quick. You might not see them as much as you think you will. So, yeah, this card is tremendous. Daring Buccaneer. This is a red human pirate uncommon 2/2. Additional cost, though. You have to either reveal a pirate or pay 2 more mana. Now, people who are fans of red, especially aggro, they love seeing 2/2s for 1 red, and they know they'll have drawbacks, but they love seeing them. Is this drawback too much? I don't think it is in a pirate deck, if a pirate deck can get there again. I'm not sold on that quite yet, but maybe we'll see more cards over the course of the week. I hope we do. If you have a pirate deck and you want to put something down quick, start turning raid on, and get a little aggro, this card could be quite good. Now, later in the game, even if your hand's kind of empty, well, then paying 3 is not horrible, but you don't want to play 3 for a 2/2, but you know what? You're really kind of banking on the fact that some of the time you're going to get this early and it's going to be good for you. Yeah, I do think it has potential for standard, but it needs more support around it at this point. Same thing for limited. If you're all in on pirates, pick this up. You're going to love it. If you're not deep into pirates, or at least have enough targets that you feel like most of the time you're going to be able to play this for 1, then if that's the case, I would avoid this. Because again, you don't want to be paying 3 for a 2/2. There's just better options for you in draft and sealed even. Ixalan, Primal Storm, 2 red and 4, legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. This one's a rare 6/6. When this attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Wow. Okay, these Elder Dinosaurs are awesome. This one, no exception. First off, you get a 6/6 body for 6, a very relevant size for turn 6, 7, 8 of most games, even without evasion. This is still a pretty decent beater. Now, you really want that attack trigger to happen, and the more it can happen, the more chance you have of having a big play and hitting something big, right? Remember, it's looking at not only your opponent's deck, but also your deck, so you have a good chance of hopefully hitting something decent, if nothing else. Even if it's something small, it's just super value, right? Now, you want it to be able to trigger as quickly as possible. Haste would be a nice way to pull that off. Now, it doesn't guarantee that it happens. Your opponent could still have an answer if you're trying to give this thing haste. But if you play this with, say, something like Registrar Alpha, it just increases your odds of being able to pull it off. And maybe you can do it when your opponent's shields are down and they're tapped out and they just don't see it coming. That would be awesome. Now, like I said, it is high variance. You could miss with this, but for the most part, you're still attacking him with 6/6 if you do, so how bad could it be, right? For standard, I'd like to see this maybe in the Gruul Dinosaur deck, the one that we saw before. This might be a great upgrade for the deck. Perhaps push it more into a competitive deck. That would be super sweet. This could be one of the tools that does that. Or maybe you just see a mid-rangey to big red style deck show up in the format, something along those lines. I mean, we have seen other good mid-range to large red creatures and other sets that are still standard legal. maybe we get something like that. Who knows? You just have to kind of brew something, see if it can work and hang with the more competitive decks that we see in this past meta. Now, let's talk about Commander for a second, because you'd have to talk about Commander. In a multiplayer game, this affects everybody's library, so you have a chance of hitting some huge plays. This thing won't live long, obviously. I mean, someone's going to take it out. People will team up to take this out. But if you could give it haste with something like Xenaghost or something like that, this could be kind of awesome. So this could also be your commander, too, if you just want it to be your commander. And that way, if it fails here and there, you have another shot at it later on in the game. But your opponents are going to have to be prepared for this, or they're going to start to lose the game and fall behind pretty quick. Really awesome design. Excited to see this. Also limited, too, before I forget. Yeah, first pick draft. Just pick this up. You'll be really happy to play this, no doubt. Pirate's Pillage. This costs a red and 3. It's a sorcery uncommon. As an additional cost to this, though, you do have to discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 colorless treasure artifact tokens. Okay, so this is a way to get through your deck a little bit faster at the expense of discarding a card, but you do get 2 treasure tokens, which is nice for fixing or filtering, right? So even though you're paying 4 for this, I feel like you're kind of getting your value out of it. With that being said, I don't see myself playing this card. I really don't see it in Standard. I think it's too expensive for what it does. When you talk about Limited, is it playable? Again, only if I don't have a good draw spell. Like, that's why I'm playing this. Or maybe I do want to pitch something into my graveyard. Like, I have some sort of weird reanimation plan, which could be possible. Then maybe I play this just as a pitch spell. But for the most part, I think I skip this if I have a better card draw spell in my pool. Alright, our next card comes to us from a Portuguese language preview. It is Tilonalli's Summoner. It's a red and 1 human with Ascend. Every time that this attacks, you may pay X in red. If you do, create X 1/1 elemental creature tokens tapped and attacking. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step unless you have the city's blessing. It's a 1/1. So, this is interesting to me. It's cheap, but it's fragile as a 1/1. You kind of have to untap with this for it to do anything, and you have to have some mana to pour into it. If you have that, this is basically a Ascend enabler. I mean, this is to help you get to Ascend. And once you kind of hit that threshold by adding these 1/1s to the battlefield, then you get the token and it stays. It doesn't go away. And at that point, then your tokens don't go away either. So you either want to go super aggro and wide and have a lot of mana in your deck, or you want to be trying to hit the city's blessing. But again, it only costs 2, that's cheap, but a 1/1, it has to stay alive for you to do that. And that's the awkwardness of this card. I think it is way too random, and I can't really see it being consistent enough for Standard. Even if somehow there is some sort of crazy Ascend deck that someone puts together, I just don't see the consistency here. And I'm also very skeptical there's going to be a crazy Ascend deck. But I think that this card is going to just have a hard time staying alive. People aren't going to let you untap with this if they can help it. But again, you are pulling a removal spell out of their hand for a 2 casting cost creature, so maybe it's not a horrible thing all the time either. Let's talk about Limited a little bit with this one. I think that Draft or Sealed, again, there are certain decks where this might be good, especially if you have some sort of like buff effects that are going to buff these elementals or something like that, and you can go wide, maybe close out a game. But again, you do have to untap with it. I don't think it's unplayable at all, though. In fact, maybe it's not one of my top picks in a pack, but maybe I would try this out and just kind of see how it plays in the right deck. Again, I want to make sure I have a lot of mana to back it up, maybe even a little ramp or something like that. But if I feel like I can protect this thing and have the extra X mana to pour into it, I'd give it a try. I'm not crazy about it, but I'd try it out. Jadelight Ranger. Alright, 2 green and 1. Merfolk Scout, rare 2/1. When this enters the battlefield, it explores. Oh, then it explores again. Okay, this card's super sweet. Okay, I've been talking about Merfolk a lot today and how I think they're going to get there, and there's a big payoff coming. Well, this isn't quite it, but this is starting to get closer. 2 green, maybe that's a little awkward for 3 casting costs because you want to give this out relatively quick, but think of the options here. This thing is either a 2/1 where you drew 2 cards, granted they're lands, but it's helping you work through your deck. Or this thing is a 3/2, and you drew a card, and you got to do one of the little quasi-scry-ish things that you do with Explore. Or you get a 4/3 for 3, and you got to do the quasi-scry thing twice. All those options, super sweet for 3 mana. That's why this thing's a rare. And this is actually awesome. Like, this is phenomenal. I am going to play this in Standard in that Merfolk deck. Modern Merfolk? Maybe. I'm going to say maybe. Again, that deck is super tight right now, but this is not a bad card at all. Like, I'd at least want to test it there. Again, maybe not 4-ofs or anything like that, because you are thinking about your Lord effects and squeezing those in and all that stuff. But maybe I'd want to try it out. Not in abundance, but maybe a little bit. And standard, yes, it will get there. Limited purposes, it's awesome. First pick it a lot of the time, I think. It's just a really solid creature card that's either going to help you get through your deck or just have a big battlefield presence or maybe something in between. Path to Discovery. Okay, this one is pretty interesting. Green and 3 enchantment. We love these 4 casting cost enchantments in this set. And whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. I do love to explore. But the question is, do I love to explore at the expense of a 4 casting cost enchantment? That is a tough one. It's going to depend on my build. I'm going to say this. I don't really see this happening in Standard. I think it's a little too clunky because it's going to cost 4. It's too expensive for it to do nothing unless you can play another creature that turn. And then later on, even if you can put a lot of creatures into the battlefield, even through token generation, Explorer is fantastic, but I don't know if you're going to take the risk, because if something happens where you can't get creatures on the battlefield for a couple turns, you really wasted a turn with this, and that could feel really bad in a faster competitive scene, right? So I don't think it quite gets there, but wow, I would love to try to make it work because it just seems awesome. What's nice is Merfolk does have a little bit of token generation, which could enhance this card a little bit. So there are times I would be happy to run it in Draft or Sealed. It just depends on the deck. I want to make sure I have some ways to really get the most use out of this. So I'd want to be really creature heavy, have some token generation, maybe even a little ramp to back it up, because it is costing 4, which is, it's a lot for something that doesn't do anything on its own, and that starts to get a little painful. So maybe not for every build, but I could see myself playing it some of the time. Swift Warden, 2 green and 1, Merfolk Warrior, uncommon 3/3 with Flash. When this enters the battlefield, target Merfolk you control gains hexproof till end of turn. Great Merfolk card here. We've seen some good Merfolk today. We're going to see a lot more good Merfolk, actually. So that's the theme of the day today. And this one is no exception. 3 casting cost, yeah, 2 on color, but it's 3/3. So if you're talking about your limited game, Draft and Sealed, that's pretty good, because a lot of times you end up playing 4 casting cost 3/3s. So I'm all for a 3 casting cost 3/3. Even if I have no other Merfolk in my deck, I'm pretty happy with this. Now, on top of that, it protects a Merfolk. Also, it is a Merfolk, so that could matter. And it has Flash. So for all of that, for 3 mana, yeah, sign me up. I'm really happy to pick this up really early in a pack and Draft, quite honestly. Maybe even first pickable. Standard, can it get there? I do think the Merfolk deck will be a thing. More on that later. But yeah, I do think this will be part of that standard Merfolk deck. The hexproof is just a nice way to protect the key Merfolk that you need to survive. And again, itself, it's a nice little beater too. It has some size behind it for 3 mana. World Shaper, a green and 3, 3/3 Merfolk Shaman. This one's a rare. When this attacks, you may put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. When this dies, put all land cards from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Okay, a couple things with this card. I mean, you could go one of 2 directions. One, you could look at this as a ramp card. I don't think that's the best way to look at it, though, because it is a very weird, roundabout way to ramp. And our biggest problem right now with ramp is just the fact that we don't have anything good to ramp into necessarily. Now, maybe there's some cards we'll see later this week that change that. But, like, look at Growing Rights of Itlimoc, for example. Awesome ramp card, just what do we do with it, right? So I think the ramp concept, anyway, just isn't real strong in this particular meta, maybe in the future. Now, take that away. What else can you do with this? Well, you can mill yourself for things other than the lands. What's that going to accomplish? Well, we saw the card yesterday that got us talking about Reanimation, and perhaps Reanimation could be a standard deck if we get enough tools. Well, this is another one of those tools. I mean, imagine playing some great Reanimation targets, maybe some of these Elder Dinosaurs or something, and you have the ability to attack in with this, mill yourself a little bit, get one of those in your graveyard, and then later on you have the chance to bring it back. That could be kind of sweet. So we have to see what other cards show up in the set that complement this strategy. If there's enough of them, and it's good enough and fast enough, then you never know. We might see that in Standard. I'm a little hesitant to say that right now. I want to see more cards, but this could be a piece of that formula. We'll know more as the week goes on. Now let's talk about Commander real quick with this one, because I do have to point out, Get Rog Monster fans, you're going to like this. This is just a good card for that type of deck, right? So a lot of extra value there. When it comes to limited, I would say I think it's an okay card. I mean, a 3/3 for 4 sometimes is just fine. And you don't have to use the ability if you don't have a reason to use it. Sometimes you just need a curve filler that's a 3/3 for 4, and you might just play it. It's also a merfolk, which could matter in a lot of your merfolk tribal. So sometimes you just might simply ignore the ability, and that's fine if you do. But if you have a reason to actually activate it, then even better. So it's a fine card. Maybe it doesn't always make your cut. It's going to be better in some builds than others. Probably a little better in draft than in sealed. Alenda the Dusk Rose. Black, white, 2. Legendary creature vampire knight. Mythic 1/1 with lifelink. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on this. And whenever this dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the power. Wow, okay. Big drawback. It's staring you in the face. 1/1 for 4. Especially 2 different colors. Ouch. That is a little painful. But whenever another creature dies, it does get the counter. That's kind of nice. And when this does die, even if it dies as a 1/1, you get 1 token back out of it because it's based on the power. So does that make me feel a lot better? No, not a lot better, but a little better maybe. Because yes, forecasting costs 1/1 with lifelink. It dies. My opponent just wipes it out early. At least I'm still getting a 1/1 lifelink creature out of it. Not great, but at least I'm not completely getting hosed. So what do you do with this thing, right? I like the fact that if it can stay alive, if you can protect it, it does get kind of out of hand quick, especially if you have a lot of vampire tokens and you're just running them into things and just doing a lot of damage, gaining some life. This thing gets bigger. It becomes a force after a while that your opponent has to be aware of, and they have to deal with it. Problem is, it's just so fragile. It's very, very fragile. If they can take care of it quickly, you're not really getting your money's worth out of it. If they can't, you could get your money's worth and then some out of it. So it is a high risk, high reward card. Because of that, I don't know if it's the standard play. I think it's too high risk, high reward, but the reward is actually pretty high in certain circumstances. So limited purposes, kind of the same thing. Like if I feel like my opponent can blow this up quick, it's bad, but they're not going to have as quite of a streamlined deck as standard. So I'd probably take the risk if I'm in the vampire deck and try running this because it could be really good in certain circumstances for you. So yeah, I think it's good for limited. Maybe not 100% like first pick, but a high pick. And if I can get into the vampire deck, then yeah, I'd try it out and go for it. It does have its flaws, but I don't know, the potential upside is pretty high. This is a really weird middle of the road card for me. Okay, now we're talking. Legion Lieutenant. Black, white, vampire knight. 2/2, uncommon. Other vampires you control, get +1/+1. Yep, this is it. Vampire Lord for 2 mana. This is what we've been waiting for, and I've been kind of teasing this through the whole video. The mono white vampire deck is going to be splashing some black, and this card is amazing. Yes, it doesn't impact itself like most lords, but it can play in conjunction with others as not legendary. So this is super sweet. Mono white vampires, or a variant of that now, is going to be, I think, a contender now in standard. This card got it there, as well as some of the other cards we looked at today. I think that deck could actually be a force. So watch out for it this time around because it made a little splash in the last meta. It's going to make a big splash, I think, in this meta, and this is one of the key reasons. Draft as well. Yeah, pick this up. If you can get into vampires, this is going to be awesome for you. It's uncommon, but they will go fast because a lot of people will see these and try to force vampires and such. So do have to keep that in mind. But awesome, awesome card. Merfolk Mistbinder. Here we go again. Green, blue, Merfolk Shaman, uncommon 2/2. Other merfolks you control get +1/+1. One question I have, are we going to see a pirate one of these and a dinosaur one of these? Maybe there'll be 3 colors if we do, but even so, that could be super sweet. But let's talk about what we have in front of us here. Let's not get greedy. This is what I've been alluding to. This is what's going to make the merfolk deck possible in standard. This is good enough for modern play in the modern version of the merfolk deck that we've been seeing that actually put up some good results running the green. That deck gets better. The standard deck becomes a deck now, and it's all because of this card. Some of the others we saw today too, but this card, huge, 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 huge card. Big impact. And same as the Vampire Lord we just talked about a moment ago. Good if you want to draft some merfolk and draft, or if you have a lot in sealed, it's going to be fine for you there too. But these will go quick, even though they are uncommon, because they have a good power behind them. I love these cards. Glad they made these lords for this set. A little curious why they didn't do it in the first set. They're kind of stringing us along a little bit, but awesome card. Huatli, Radiant Champion. Okay, here's one of the Planeswalkers. And a lot of people were thinking the Planeswalker would be Azor, but it looked like from the spoilers we saw in the art book that Azor will lose the spark. So Instead, we get a Huatli again, which is actually pretty cool. I like the character. A Huatli Radiant Champion, a white, a green, and 2. Legendary Planeswalker, of course. Mythic, 3. Loyalty, +1. Put a loyalty counter on this for each creature you control. Interesting. -1. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. -8. You get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. That's pretty good ultimate if you can get there. Here's the thing with this card. First off, you have to kind of figure out what deck it wants to be in. And it could be a dinosaur deck. I mean, yeah, it could be. Like, throwing a couple extra points of power or toughness on a dinosaur trampler or something could be decent. Or it could be maybe a more go-wide deck. I think it's actually better there. Like a vampire deck or maybe even a merfolk deck. And I think that's why the casting cost is the way it is. Now, with that being said, does this see standard play? I don't think it does, just because it's just too high variance. Like, there's a lot of board sweeps available to people right now. Like, if you look at standard, and especially if a deck like this became good, you're going to see a lot of board sweeps happening. So because of those sweeps that exist out there that are really decent, I think that really hurts this card a lot in the current meta. And it's not a bad card. Like, I won't say this is a bad Planeswalker or anything like that. But I will say that I just don't really see it fitting into the current meta. And at least for maybe not a really long time, if ever. Just because of it's so dependent on creatures. Like, that +1 is interesting, but imagine you play this and you have no creatures in play. Like, I pay 4 for this thing, I can plus it to 4, but it's doing nothing for me. Like, there's nothing I can get out of this other than try to keep ticking it up and eventually maybe ultimate it, which is kind of unrealistic as well, because it's going to take a while for you to do that. If you don't have creatures to protect it, you're kind of in trouble, because this doesn't protect itself in any way, other than potentially adding a lot of loyalty if you do have other creatures that already exist. But again, it doesn't truly protect itself with like a blocker or anything like that. And I think that is going to be a hardship for this card just generally. Is it a fun, like, casual card? Maybe throw it in a commander deck with a lot of creatures? Yeah, sure, absolutely. You could have a good time with this, and I'm sure there's some broken things you could do with it. But I just think it's a little too inconsistent, unfortunately, for the world of Standard. I'm still going to play this in limited games. I'll probably even first pick this in a lot of drafts, because Planeswalkers are just plain powerful, no matter how you shake it. So, yeah, I'll play this in drafts and first pick it some of the time and be really happy with it. But aside from that, unfortunately, I don't see it getting there in Standard. Alright, with that being said, those are the cards for today. We saw a lot of them. This changes the whole, like, world, I think, when it comes to what's coming in Standard. Yeah, there's still obstacles out there. I mean, energy decks are tough decks. Can we get something that can hang a little better with those decks? Starts to feel like maybe the pieces are coming together now. And I'm excited about this particular day of previews. Yesterday was like a good day. Like, okay, yeah, those cards are pretty cool. Today, I feel like we're getting some power, and we're starting to see what the meta is going to look like, and this is going to add to some speculation, I'm sure, this week when it comes to singles that already exist and such. So, pretty exciting stuff. We're going to be back tomorrow with more. Now, if there's a lot of previews that come out later today or any significant ones, I will do a follow-up video, but if not, I'll just roll anything small into tomorrow's, and we'll be back again then, Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, we get the full set review started, believe it or not. This feels like this is going by so quick. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.